Watchung, particularly the center of the borough and Watchung Circle, has seen several major flooding events in the last 100 years. The west and east ends of the borough drain toward the Watchung Circle into the Stony Brook and continue to travel parallel to Somerset Street toward North Plainfield, New Jersey. One of the most notable recorded floods in recent history occurred in 1942, photos from that day which you are seeing now. Of course, no list of flooding would be complete without mentioning Hurricane Floyd on September 16, 1999, or Hurricane Irene on August 26, 2011. On September 1, 2021, all of New Jersey was impacted by Hurricane Ida. The National Weather Service Cooperative Station, Hillsborough, which is located in Somerset County, recorded the highest rainfall in the state at 9.45 inches, with a peak 1-hour precipitation rate of 3.3 inches. This rainfall rate equated to a 500-year average reoccurrence interval, or 0.2% chance for a rainfall event like it in any given year. Both Watchung and Best Lake were inundated with nearly 4 feet of water at the confluence of Watchung and Best Lake, adjacent to the Texier House Museum. Some Watchung residents even recall significant flooding in 1971. While each of the above-mentioned events were significant, the flood event that seemed to stick out most in the memories of our residents was that from August 3, 1973. This was the flood that brought the ultimate destruction of the beloved Wetumpka Falls in the borough and recognition and advancement of the Greenbrook Flood Control Commission, which had been recently established in response to the New Jersey floods of 1971.
The flood in the 70s was the worst one that I know of, and I remember that people lost their cars here in Watchung that went down the brook.
The day of the flood, the bad flood in my lifetime. I know there had been others before that. I got up really early and it was raining hard, and if I drove my dad to the bus in Scotch Plains, I could have his 69 Mustang for the day. So I did. And we were waiting and waiting. It was just raining hard, and the bus didn't come. And we waited, and the next bus didn't come. And at that point he thought, I remember him saying, Route 22 must be flooded somewhere. And we didn't realize that the somewhere was here. Until we got to the overpass to try to come back up the hill, and that was really flooding. So we did get home. At that point, my mom owned a building on the Circle. She had bought an old derelict factory building, and Bob Finney was the builder who converted it for her to a real estate office, and she ran Countryside Realtors there for 34 years. But it's right at the Circle is right at the point where the two streams from the valley came together from opposite directions.
Mm-hmm. I remember Charlie Curtis was here, and he was the borough administrator, and I went down and picked him up, and when I came home, back up here, it was around 8 o'clock, 8:30, and we watched the water on the wall across the street there. It just came up like, moved like my hand, and then we looked over, we heard this big noise. In the barn, the garage went. The garage that was in the back here went. It hit that bridge, it went all to pieces. And all we seen was boards and stuff going down. That was the end of that. We had the police cars were parked out on the side. We tied them. They were starting to float. We just tied them in time. Mm-hmm. We had about a foot of water inside the Public Works garage. And probably in the tax office, we had a foot of water. You couldn't get across to the police station. They were surrounded with water. The water came down, went right down through here. It was moving
fast
at too fast of a rate. We threw a rope across. We hung on the rope and came across.
So I just turned 18 and just graduated Watchung Hills, and I was on my way to work. Worked in Brooklyn at my dad's art materials, Utrecht Art Materials, the factory. And we took the train from Plainfield. So we came down Somerset, and it was raining and the water was high. And I was in the back seat of our wood panel Country Squire station wagon. I turned around to look. There was only this much of the falls left. We continued on past the triangle, and my mom, smartly, she decided we couldn't, it's actually deeper down there, as we all know now, right? Came back to the triangle. And the cars, there was a auto repair shop across from Watchung on the stream side. And every little Volkswagen Beetle in there loosened up and was gone. And then that shop, the whole building went. I can still see all the tools they had on their back wall and some big oak trees.
The story I really remember about that is the story of Dot Kenney. Dot Kenney was the art teacher in the Watchung schools my whole childhood, and she was a wonderful, spunky lady. She had had great personal tragedy. Her husband had passed away, leaving her with 2 little girls to raise. And later, her older daughter was tragically murdered. And the PTO created a scholarship in memory of Suzanne Kenney. And they still have that scholarship. But Dot had, when she retired from the schools, had bought a little house on Somerset Street right next to the river. And the first floor was her art shop, only originals, and she lived above it. When she came downstairs that morning, she saw the water was halfway up her picture window and realized it was going to break and that the house could go.
Suddenly I look, and Mrs. Kenney is at her front door. She has a cigar box in her hand. Older folks back then put their belongings in the cigar boxes. And she's like shaking. She's at the front door. And at this point, Somerset Street is a river, almost up to the Bergman side of the building. And so I thought, I put my first leg out there and the water was up to about here. And I took a second step and I said, this isn't gonna knock me over. I'm gonna go get her. And I did. I went over there, got her, we walked back. She was frightened. It was really, really scary. And just as we almost get to the side, she drops a cigar box. It probably had money or something valuable in it. It was at Watchung Service Center in just a couple of seconds. It was gone. She said, get the box. I didn't do that.
It was a young girl. No, she came around the circle in the car and it stalled out. And she was stuck there, so we drove in with a vehicle, hooked the chain onto the vehicle and pulled it out. We saw the kid came down with his pickup truck. And we told him it was flooded. And he went through and his truck flooded out and he stopped it by the gas station. And got out and went to the gas station and the water kept coming up. And then he ran across, his truck started floating, jumped in the back of the truck, in the bed of the truck.
Valley Drive was underwater. When we got to the point where we could walk down the hill, we walked to the Circle to try to see how her office had gotten through this. We couldn't get into it at that point. And then when we could get in, we found out we had had 4 feet of water inside the building. A car in the parking lot they found a few days later down somewhere in North Plainfield. And it brought out, the positive point of that was that it really brought people together. We had people show up, neighbors, friends, people that Mom had sold houses to, and for days and days worked from sunup to sundown to clean it up. I remember shoveling mud out the window with a snow shovel and having live fish in the filing cabinet. And because we were realtors, the Real Estate Commission requires you to keep documents, just like IRS does, for several years. So we were ironing smelly, muddy papers for weeks. And for a long time after that, we'd open a file and get a whiff of swamp mud.
Yeah.
But we got back in business pretty quickly.
We had no idea of what had happened there because people had died. People had stayed in their car when the actual Wetumpka Falls broke. It was 7 people, I think, that lost their lives, but we didn't know that at that time. So it was a true flash flood. I think between us driving down and seeing, just this much of the falls left, and to coming down and the water's receding, couldn't have been more than 40 minutes total.
Most of the damage in town was done in the center of town, and Somerset Street washed out, and the sewer line washed out, which really was rebuilt by, most of the road was rebuilt by the county. I think Santo put the sewer line back in. The pumps were washed out. A couple cars floated down out of here.
In '73, I was only a member of the fire department, and I was just 2 years as a volunteer. So our responsibility was just get to the firehouse and stand by, and do what we had to do. I remember coming around. Well, I couldn't even get around the circle. I remember getting my fire gear and walking all the way around, crossing over and getting over to the firehouse. But it was. I remember seeing all that. Everything just getting washed away. It was a tragedy. It was really something. And then the day after, we had, or later that afternoon, I guess, the gasoline from the gasoline from Getty Station over here all came to the top. So there was raw gasoline all over the roadway. So we had a old foam generator, which was it's called AFFF, aqueous film forming foam. And then what we had to do is blanket it, so if there was any sparks or anything from electrical wiring or whatever, it wouldn't ignite. And we took care of that. It was a big, huge foam all over the whole Somerset Street and by the Getty Station.
While Wetumpka Falls was never rebuilt, Mayor Tony Adario and council discussed reconstructing Wetumpka Falls in the late 1990s. New current environmental regulations at the time prohibited its reconstruction, but the hope was that it could be rebuilt and provide flood storage along the Stony Brook for future flooding events. On the morning of August 3rd, 2023, Mayor Ron Jubin and council hosted a memorial ceremony marking the 50th anniversary of the 1973 flood that claimed several lives in the area. The purpose of the ceremony was to remember and honor those lost, but also, quote, repair and prepare to bring attention to vigilant stance on waterway maintenance. Mayor Jubin discussed the need for continued state and federal financial assistance to help protect against future flooding disasters.